Hello and welcome to today's edition of WooNews TV, where we bring you spiritual concepts into the mainstream to make them more relatable. Today's topic is an introduction to the 11 principles of intentional living. And my guest, Charles McAlpine, is going to share these with us. Welcome, Charles.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me.
So let me read this little bit of a bio from Charles because I want everyone to know what he's about. Charles is the owner and founder of Storm Wisdom, which is a fabulous retail store here in Phoenix, Arizona. Since opening the store in 2009, he's been focused on building community and assisting others in living more meaningful and empowered lives by introducing them to the principles of intentional living. He has jewelry, he has lots of crystals, all kinds of things in there, as well as people on site to do intuitive readings, spiritual guidance, energy work that can also do them over the phone as well. Correct, Charles?
That's right.
So even if you don't live here in the Valley, you can take advantage of some of the good things that Charles's store, Storm Wisdom, offers. So this is part of a class that we're going to be introducing you today that is going to be available, and I'll put the links at the bottom of the description. And Charles, how did this content become available? How did you come up with this?
Well, originally when we opened, as you know, because you were one of our early speakers after your first book was published, we had classroom space where we did workshops, seminars, book signings, that sort of thing. And with the COVID pandemic, we basically couldn't do classes for a while. And actually, we ended up taking out our group space, so we don't offer that anymore. But one of the things that we thought about was if we took what we were using as our mission statement, these 11 principles of intentional living, and put them in a workshop, we would still be able to share that content with people, whether they were here in Phoenix or actually anywhere. So
great.
Yeah.
So this is, I think you had mentioned to me before, this is the mission statement for the store and everything that goes in it and around it, correct?
Yeah. This way, what happens when people come in to visit, I mean, it's really a great place. And the people that have been there most of them have been with me almost since the beginning. So we have a lot of in-depth conversations with people, and it's a great way to actually really think about how we want to interact with them. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's a great space for speaking the truth. And sometimes people are dealing with difficult situations and they're so close to it that sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees. And we try to help them do that.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of trees and forests these days.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, and actually, even these 11 principles, we also came up with them as a group. I mean, I may have put down my thoughts originally and what it meant to me, but I shared it with all of the people that work there and said, "What are your thoughts? What would you change? What would you delete? What would you add?" And so we kind of came up with them together. And actually, these are, we have them printed on the wall inside the store just as a reminder, and for anybody that's curious about what we're doing and why we're doing it, it's there for all to see. So
oh, that's great. And the energy is just permeating the whole place.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So I have my little cheat sheet here, so shall we start going through them? You said they are in no particular order.
Right. So I didn't so I mean, you have to kind of put them in some kind of a sequence just to be able to present them, but in terms of their priority or their value, I think you could focus on whichever one is most important to you at the time.
Okay. So number one on Charles's list is own your authority. What does that mean?
Well, I think it's really embracing this idea that we create our own reality. That, when you wake up in the morning, if you think you're going to have a bad day, you have a bad day. It's that idea that, how we interpret a situation basically impacts how it affects us. And so owning your authority is about taking responsibility for what it is that you're creating and really looking at the situations in your life and deciding how to respond to them versus react to them.
Okay. Now, do you remember that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? It's like 18 or so years ago. They talk about kind of in an animated way, creating your own reality and how we do.
Right.
it's a kind of an intro. I just referred someone, a young person, to that, and it started helping her really understand owning your own authority and what authority we actually do have. Do you find that people have a hard time understanding their own authority, that they really are the author of this script?
I do think it's challenging, and I think part of that is just the world that we're living in right now. And I by that I mean we're so used to giving our authority away. So the example that we use in the workshop in this online course that we offer is technology. If something goes wrong with your Zoom call, or something goes wrong with your computer, or any other kind of technology, most of us don't have the experience to be able to go out and fix that. So we immediately pick up the phone and call somebody to help us with that particular problem. They have more knowledge and experience, and they are the authority around the technology in our life. The same can be said for government, corporations, religions,
Schools,
hospitals, doctors, lawyers. Yeah. So it's one of those things where, and the other thing that I think probably is even more so is we're saturated with so much media, so that, you know, like we're being given messages all the time, and if you're not really paying attention, you can begin to believe that what somebody else is saying is true for you, when in reality, owning your authority is about just checking in. And so even if you go to a doctor and they prescribe you a medication, all I'm suggesting is that you take a moment, take a couple of deep breaths, and just check in. Does this feel right to me? Do I need a second opinion? Is there something else that feels more aligned for whatever it is that I'm dealing with? And I think that there are lots of situations that we can do that. And if we start to really think about being responsible for the choices that we make every day, and responding instead of reacting to a lot of these situations, then we start to align our choices with what we're already envisioning and imagining for our future.
Right. And it's very empowering. And as I've talked about a lot in my work, the outer world is a reflection of the inner world. So as you own your own inner authority to create your outer world, then it starts to happen.
Right. I think about there are so many situations where it's easy to feel powerless. Like you see things happening around you, and it's easy to feel powerless. But in reality, so much of it is really, how am I perceiving this, and what are the filters that I'm looking through, and why do I have this particular emotional reaction to this situation? So it really is a quick self-evaluation, and just so I like to say that things happen for us and not to us.
Right.
So even when something difficult is happening, when I've had those kinds of situations, even in the middle of it, I know that there's a reason for it. I just may not know it in that moment. And it might take a year before I really understand the value out of it, right? Yeah. So.
Yeah. And your reaction is part of your gauge.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just think there's so much going on right now, and we're not going to change that, right? We're not going to change the fact that we're inundated with media, or that government plays a big role in our life, or any of those kinds of things. That isn't going to change. So what we can change is how we interact and respond to those things.
What we do with that, and how we stay sovereign of our own space, and turn off the media source if we want to, and really be more mindful of what we're consuming as well. That's part of owning your own authority.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's and I think that's one of the reasons why, for me personally, this felt like the right first step in terms of introducing these 11 principles to people, regardless of, some people are certainly a lot better with this. I know for me, it was a big transitional thing to realize that I wasn't a victim of these things. There are things, like you want authorities when it comes to, people driving down the road. You want you want that, right? But in a lot of other situations, I think sometimes just stepping back, taking a breath, and thinking about, does this feel right for me, is a very important and simple thing to do.
I agree. Okay, number 2, staying present.
So one of the interesting things that I realized is one of the first things I heard when I started doing some spiritual and personal growth work and stuff like that was this idea of being in the moment, staying present, experiencing the now. And it was so simple that I kind of ignored it. But every place that I looked, because I thought I am in the moment. I'm here.
I do this, yeah.
Right. But every place, the more you explore, the more you realize it's one of the primary tenets of almost every religion on the planet and every belief system. And so after being hit on the head with it a few times, you start to say, well, what does that really mean? And I know for me personally, I'm very future oriented. I'm always thinking about what's going to happen in 6 months. And so if you're always thinking about the present, then you're not actually in the moment. Or conversely, I have friends who are, they're stuck in their childhood. They had a situation that was very uncomfortable for them. And no matter what, that's kind of influence and affecting everything that they think about. So I think this idea of just bringing yourself back into the moment is a very important principle. And it may sound easy, but it's probably one of the harder ones to actually do and do well.
Literally a moment to moment thing. I heard it once that if you're thinking about being in the moment, then you're not in the moment.
Right.
Oh, I had to think about that for a second, then it made sense.
Yeah, I know for me personally, one of the things that really helped me to understand that I wasn't really practicing staying in the moment was becoming more aware of how much our body communicates with us. And if you're in your head all the time, then you can't necessarily feel the whispers that your body is constantly giving you. I think it's a constant feedback loop. But I was just one of those people that really wasn't very good at hearing any of that until I created an injury for myself, or stumbled and did something that would kind of wake me up and force me into the moment. So
yeah, if you're not in your body, your guides kind of help you get back in your body, don't they?
quickly.
Yes, a little abruptly sometimes. So be more mindful so you don't get that abrupt incident.
Yeah, exactly.
Number 3, following the energy. This one, I love this one. I try to explain this and encourage my clients to do this. And sometimes it's hard to encapsulate, but I'd love to hear your explanation of it.
Well, I have to say, when I first, before I opened Storm Wisdom, I was just really beginning to understand and experience what follow the energy means. As we just kind of alluded to, your body is constantly giving you messages. You're constantly having these sensory experiences. I think the same thing happens in whatever environment you're in. So it's that kind of the story about walking into a room and knowing that something is off, that that something has just happened there, even though nobody's saying anything. I think we're constantly being fed information from the people and the places and the things that are around us. And it's paying attention to those things. A lot of times, I think what happens is we'll have an idea that we're going to go in one direction, and all of a sudden it feels like we should, go in a different direction. And rather than questioning or challenging that, like, follow that energy. Why is that happening? So I know for myself, one of the things that I realized was I could use this metaphor of swimming in a river. I get so locked into doing things a particular way that all of a sudden it just feels like I'm swimming against the current, and I'm not making any headway at all. And if I will just stop and allow myself to kind of flow with wherever the river wants to take, all of a sudden I can get to the same place that I wanted to, but in just an easier way.
lot less resistance. I have a particular client who's working on a deal and he's been pushing and pushing, and there's so many obstacles that keep flying up in front of him. And what I say to him is, there's no flow there. So stop for a minute, and either this is not meant to happen, or change the course a little bit and get back into that flow. Feel your way through it. Maybe it's a simple course correction. Maybe it's a timing thing, but pausing and recognizing that and altering as needed puts you right back in the flow, even if the flow, as you said, is to do nothing.
Right. Well, and I think for me, I always thought like if I stopped swimming and I went with the flow, that meant that I was going in the opposite direction.
Oh,
And the reality is it's like it may not be the opposite direction at all. It just means that you might have to go around the rock that's in front of you, or take a different path.
and
So,
the another thing that happens when you go in the flow is the opportunities are there that you maybe didn't expect, didn't think you wanted, didn't think could happen, and they could ultimately be better for you.
well, and I think that that's really the biggest benefit of this principle, right? Following the energy. And it's what you just said, Julie, that if you begin to pay attention to these things, these small, subtle clues, what'll happen is you'll notice the synchronicities, you'll notice the coincidence, you'll notice the opportunities that really present themselves very effortlessly once you start to align yourself with what's energetically available for you. You will see it with much greater ease.
And the more present you are, the more you will recognize all of that.
Right, exactly.
These really do flow into each other, don't they? Okay,
Yeah.
one of my personal favorites, using your intuition.
Yeah, I was thinking
Number
about this.
4.
Yeah, I was thinking about this after we decided to do this, because I was thinking, well, this was going to be. I really do think that we get so much information, so much intuitive guidance, and depending upon how you relate to that, how much you trust it, how much you rely upon it, the more you use intuition, the more it grows. And it's funny because, coming from a corporate world, I was very much, I had to see something, I had to hear something, I had to feel something in order to be able to make a decision. And now, after 13 years of running in a center for intentional living, it doesn't matter what something looks like to me or what it sounds like to me. It's like, how does it feel to me? What is my intuition? Yeah. What is my intuition telling me? So, yeah.
And as you said, the more you use it, the more you trust it, the more it happens, the more loudly and clearly it comes through for you.
Right. And I think one of the things that's interesting is that we have multiple intuitive senses. And some of us have naturally stronger intuitive senses. And so my thought is always go for the one that's easiest for you, develop that, and the others come along.
Yeah, that's true.
The others come along anyway, so, but I remember, so this isn't really about intuition as much, but I remember when I used to lead meditations and stuff like that, some of the people would have these really amazing visual experiences where others would just have kind of an internal knowing. And the people who could describe these beautiful visuals, the people who had the knowing would think, oh, I would love to have those visuals.
Right.
It's like, but you have this knowing, you have this insight that, and a lot of times, it's like, go with what works for you first, and those other things will come along.
Yeah, I'd love to have more of those visuals, but they don't always come for me.
Right. Yeah. And actually what I found was early on, I had a lot of visual clues, but really they're not as important to me anymore. I think they were when I was first starting out and stuff.
It's tangible. It's something you can see.
Right. Yeah. But so
one of the things I tell people, particularly now, as we were talking about all the information in the media, for every story with facts, there's a completely opposing story with facts. So what does one believe? Well, you have to go within and ask yourself.
Right.
A, if it even matters, and B, what is truth?
Right. Yeah, and is it actually even important to you?
Exactly. Does it really matter?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, number 5, taking care of yourself.
I'm gonna say, well, this is pretty, pretty basic in terms of, you know, taking care of your physical body, getting the right nutrition for you, getting the right exercise for you. I don't think there's a one size fits all. It isn't about, you have to, walk 3 miles a day or go to the gym 5 times a week or any of those kinds of things. It's really, what is your body asking for? What is it longing for? What does it need to be the best that it can be? And I think that, all of these things do lead into one another.
Mhm.
So if you're going to stay present and follow the energy and pay attention to your intuition and your guidance, your body is going to be communicating to you exactly what it needs. And sometimes it's just a matter of standing up and moving around, and other times it might be rest. But it really thinking about, what do I need to do to honor my physical body?
And to do that, as you do that, then this is a question, you are more able, your system is calmer and more grounded, and you're more able to stay present, as I'm reading the list again, follow the energy and use your intuition and feel your intuition as you're taking more care of your body.
Yeah, yeah. And really, what is it you're trying to create for yourself, right? So like, for example, where we live in a time where most of us have lots of stressors that are coming at us, whether it's family or relationships or work or social situations. There's a lot of demands that are put on us. The more we can really pay attention to taking care of ourselves. I mean, I think the other message that most of us were given when we were young is that, it's more important to take care of others first. And the reality is, this the kind of the airplane analogy of put, your mask on first and then help. It's really like, if you really want to be in service to others, take care of yourself first.
So that you can sustain.
Right.
And have something to offer. You can't give what you don't have.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a tough one, but it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. And I think one of the things that's kind of nice to figure out or learn about this is that the more you do this, the more you realize it's not as complicated as it seems.
That certainly doesn't have to be, does it?
Right.
Yeah.
And also, this kind of speaks to the media thing about owning your own authority and stuff like that. But we're bombarded with images that say, this is how you should look, this is how much you should weigh, this is what you should wear, this is that.
Right.
And the reality is, it's like, no, we're all individual, we're all unique. You need to honor yourself, and you need to honor your body and what's right for you. What works for me is probably not going to work for you, and vice versa. There may be overlaps and things where we can support each other, but we're all going to do it a different way.
It seems like as you practice these steps, that becomes, you discover more of your own unique self and are more comfortable with it, and it all just, again, feeds into everything else.
Yeah, exactly. I also want to mention that probably one of the biggest things about all of these principles is you're really developing this power of your internal observer, the ability to kind of distance yourself from the current situation that you're experiencing and looking at how you're how you are, or how you're reacting to a situation. And the more we can see that, the more we begin to recognize that so many of the decisions that we're making are based on an autopilot that's been created probably from our earliest childhood experiences and stuff like that. And so developing that internal observer is going to help with all of these.
Absolutely. Which in and of itself is a whole nother practice.
Right, exactly.
Which leads us to number 6, which is one I'm constantly working on, is establish healthy boundaries.
Right. Yeah, I think this one was also really challenging for me, especially when you have been brought up to, to always be nice. So this idea this idea that if somebody asks you to do something and it doesn't feel right to you and you say no, you're not being nice, but it's like
Right.
if it's crossing a personal boundary for you, or if it's something that really isn't aligned with your values or what it is that you're creating, I think boundaries are really important. I think
Or if it's simply not convenient.
right,
Do we
exactly.
even pause long enough? It's about practicing that pause to assess, is this right for me? Is this a good time? Is this a good fit? Could I do this maybe in 2 days as opposed to now? Is there another way to help this person? But we don't typically, I don't think we're so used to just responding quickly. We
Right.
don't stop to think if, let's see, is this really a good thing?
Yeah. One of the women that I work with, she actually manages the store. Her name is Gisela. She does um, uh, she does human design, which is a kind of a combination system that takes into account 7 different modalities and stuff like that. And there are several different human design types, which basically would say, you know, you're better off waiting, some period of time before you make a decision, because uh, emotionally we ebb and flow. And so if you make a choice or a decision when you're feeling up and really high and upbeat, a day or two later when, you're not necessarily feeling the same way, that decision that you made then might not have been good, but it will level out over time, and you'll get your clear yes, you'll get your clear no, that sort of thing. So even just giving yourself permission to not make rapid decisions is a
Right.
boundary. Yeah.
Okay, number 7, release unwanted behaviors.
Yeah, I can say, well, this is the habits, the patterns, the tendencies that we are completely aware of, and yet oftentimes struggle with. And I think a lot of that is kind of this idea of that we have to work to change those habits. And in reality, if we could approach ourselves more gently with this idea of releasing them instead, like, what is it that you want to do instead? And I do think, any of the tendencies or patterns or habits that get in our way, nobody knows them better than we do.
Right.
So it's like, what do we need to do to set that down? What would be a better alternative for us? What would, like if you have a tendency to get emotional around your family, one of your family members or something like that, that they trigger you or something like that, to actually think about what it is that you could do instead of, pulling out that particular behavior,
Right.
and using a different one instead could be very helpful.
And then later on, understand why you were triggered and where that work is internally.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Number 8, emotional dexterity. What is that, Charles?
I'm gonna say, well, this is actually kind of one of my favorites, because I did this exercise years ago where I was in a workshop and they put out all these emotions. Each one of us had all of these emotions, and they said, okay, pick the 5 emotions that are most present in your life. So I'm looking around and I find contentment, and I find happiness, and I find anxiety, and a couple of others or whatever. And I'm looking at it over the whole, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really good. I've got this great emotional landscape, and I'm thinking, oh, this is good because I don't have fear, I don't have dread, I don't have any of these constricting emotions. But then at the same time, I look and it's like, well, I also don't have joy and ecstasy and some of these really highly uplifting emotions either. I had kind of this nice self-contained pool of emotions that I would operate within. And the reality is all of our emotions are valuable, even the ones that we like to label as bad. And that's because they give us information. They're the only real thing that exists, because they are true for you, right? And I shouldn't, that sounds extreme. They're the only thing that's real. But like, when we're mentally evaluating a situation, it's going through a filter of our perceptions, our experiences, right? Like that. But with emotions, that emotion is there for a reason. It is there to inform you of something, and it is there for you to be able to make a choice about. And so I think about people thinking that anger is always bad. And it's like anger expressed without blame or shame is actually
Oh,
intimacy building.
yeah,
It's,
yeah.
it's really important. And so I think emotional dexterity is really about not trying to limit or control any of the emotions, and instead being curious about, why is this here? What's coming up now? And that's from these very expansive emotions to the ones that feel very constricting and challenging.
And
And
to allow yourself to become more comfortable with feeling uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah. It took me a while to really figure this out for myself, but one of the things that I really thought was one of the reasons that I really controlled my anger was I kind of felt like if I really got angry, I would never not be angry. And the reality is, it's just a
Oh, I
passing
see.
emotion,
Okay.
right? Like
Right.
if I started to rage against the machine, I would always be raging against the
Right.
machine. And it's like, well, the reality is, it's like, okay, what is it? There's something about this situation that is triggering this particular emotion. How does it serve you? What do you need to know about it? What do you need to do differently? Is it something that keeps coming up over and over again? Is there a change that you can make? But not to shut off the emotion. So I think one of the things that's happened in a lot of the new age teachings and stuff like that is this idea that you have to always be positive. You have to always be positive. And I think that's a trap. I think that there's
I agree.
a real problem with that, because it's like, then it makes those emotions, anything that doesn't feel, as you said, comfortable to us, all of a sudden we try to pretend don't exist, and we're shutting off valuable information for ourselves.
And on a soul level, there is no good or bad, positive or negative. It's all neutral.
Right.
I heard one time, beware of people who are happy all the time, because their anger runs very deep.
Yeah. Well,
They're not connected to it, in other words.
yeah. Well, it's also the kind of this idea that, I've had people say to me, it's like, oh no, I love everyone. And it's kind of like, well, that means you don't really like anyone.
Yeah, but do you like everyone?
Right. So.
Number 9, surround yourself in beauty. It sounds easy, but why is that intentional? Why is that a part of intentional living?
Well, I think that we are all stimulated by different things. And so what means beauty to you is not going to necessarily mean beauty to me, right? But those things that we're drawn to. So colors have their own energy. So artwork, the furniture in our house, the people in our lives, the clothes that we wear, all of those things, they actually help us to tap into and experience beauty, which is a generative energy. It actually leads to a lot of creativity and stuff like that. And the more you surround yourself with that, and once again, it isn't about it costing money or being expensive or being a particular thing. It isn't that, because this magazine tells you that this is the color for the year or something like that. If that isn't beauty to you, it's okay. Just let it go. And what does mean beauty to you? What does that mean?
And recognizing that more in your everyday surroundings.
Right. And actually, I think probably the biggest one is nature, right? Yeah. That if we allow ourselves to just stop and pause and notice what is beautiful around us, beauty is one of the fastest ways to bring yourself back into the moment, to just
lift your vibration.
Yeah. To just look and enjoy and see what really is speaking to you in the moment.
Nice. Okay, number 10, honor your uniqueness. We sort of touched on that a little bit earlier.
Yeah. This, once again, what we kind of talked about, or I kind of talked about the media and how, like for a while, you had to be stick thin and tall and blonde hair or something like that to be in, or something like that. Like the media, tries to imply that. And I don't mean to, I'm not anti-media or any of those kinds of things, but I do think what happens, there's so much marketing and so much branding that we're experienced to, that whether we realize it or not, we're being fed images that then many times we're trying to live up to. And the reality is, the beauty is in our uniqueness. We are all individual. And so those things that, I used to used to have a picture in my office that I love that said, don't tame your strange. And
Tame your strange. Okay.
yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like those things that, we suppress because we think other people are going to have a hard time, adjusting to or accepting them.
Mm-hmm.
They might be the thing that makes us, have the greatest impact in somebody else's life. So
Well, you tapping into your own uniqueness, I think, gives other people the permission to do the same.
right. And if you're not tapping into your uniqueness, then what's happening to your authenticity?
Right.
Where's that going? So.
Oh, and the more I think you become aware of your own uniqueness, the more you have a more fulfilling life. You have you feel more enriched, and you have a better sense of what you can offer others.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Finally,
and there's only one you.
Yes, there's only one us. Yes, that's true. There's only one you. So they say.
Yeah.
Let's see. Does that ring true? Yeah. Okay. Number 11, be grateful. We hear this so much, but there's an energy behind this, and let's go a little deeper into being grateful.
Yeah, I think actually gratitude is the greatest generative energy. So if you're feeling down or feel like you're in a tough situation, if you take just a couple of minutes and really think about what it is that you are grateful for in your life,
genuinely grateful for,
right, you will start to shift that energy. You will begin to lift yourself out of that. And it's and there is so much to be grateful for. We have so many blessings in our lives and stuff like that. It's just a way to once again become aware. And not only does it lift our energy, but it also helps to bring us back into the present moment. So,
and it literally creates more reasons to be grateful. You bring more things into your life to be grateful for. It seems to be an automatic response to gratitude.
I think so. And I also think that it helps with clarity, right?
Yeah.
Like once you become aware of what you're grateful for in terms of the choices and decisions that you're trying to make in your life as you're being more intentional, I think it actually offers a lot of clarity for, what do you want more of, or what do you want less of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. We're done. Shoot. That was all 11.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. Of course, everything is connected anyway, but I appreciate how one helps the other, which helps the other, which helps the other, which it's all connected. It's one, what is it? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Right.
That's what this seems to lead to. Do you have a suggestion on somebody wants to start with one thing? Start with one. Would you have one that you might recommend?
Actually, I do think it's going to vary by the individual. But one of the things that I realized is I was under the impression that you could pick and choose the one you wanted to work on our site. And in reality, right now, it actually goes in the same sequence that we just covered. So I am going to probably have somebody look at that, because I think that the people should have an opportunity to say, right now, I need to focus on, establishing healthy boundaries, and to go there first, because it is the sequence doesn't matter. I can tell you that personally, the own your authority was probably one of the more important things for me. It really helped me to really understand that I'm not a victim in this lifetime. I'm really responsible for what I'm creating. And as a result of practicing these principles, and the other thing, Julie, I want to say is I don't necessarily think that these are complex and that they're going to require a lot of time and that you have to put a lot of effort into it. It's just they're good touch points for how do I walk around in my life and continue to focus on what it is that I want to create, rather than constantly responding to all the stimuli that's around us. So I don't think it's, like, and oh, by the way, if you break a boundary, or you realize that you're trying to suppress an emotion, or you didn't pay attention to your intuition, you get another chance to do it again. It isn't that it's hard work. It's just that it's staying in alignment with what it is you're wanting to create.
And staying, I see these as just creating a habit of the awareness, creating the awareness of each 11 of these things.
Yeah. And I think if I think it's good to just kind of pay attention to, like, where are you at? I mean, even if you just took this, the list of these 11 principles and kind of went through and did a, on this one, on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I?
We'll check in.
It might be that you find that you're 9s and 10s for 7 or 8 of them, but there's 1 or 2 where you've got a little bit lower. It's like, okay, well, then pay attention to those ones for a little while, and just rather than it being like a challenging homework assignment or something like that, is to realize that this is really just a way to check in with yourself and to see what's important to you.
You could even cut them up and put them in a bowl and pick one for that day.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great idea.
Have fun with it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Charles. This was very insightful. I want everyone to know, again, the links to the class is going to be on the description, as is the link to Storm Wisdom, and another link that Charles sent for an assessment, which I found was interesting. So that all of that fun stuff is going to be on there. You can play around with that.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And we will see you all soon. We're going to have Charles back, by the way, and we're going to talk about crystals very soon. So I call Charles a crystal keeper. I don't know what Charles calls himself, but that's how I see Charles. So we're going to do a show on crystals soon. So stay tuned for that as well. Thanks again.